I'll mark it.
Red and green.
Yeah. Right. The green just defines, you don't need to worry about these as this part, so that doesn't bother you.
Subcategories within funding categories.
We're good? In that case, I'll call the April 13th meeting of the Haymarket Planning Commission to order. Roll call, please. Here. Here. Here.
Here.
Okay. Minutes from March 9th. I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting on March 9th, 2015.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Citizens' time. At this point, we'll invite any citizen who wishes to address the Planning Commission. Please come forward.
Dottie Leonard, 14801 Washington Street. And I want to say it was interesting catching the little powwow going on right outside the door with you, Mr. Chair, and one of your commissioners, which reminded me so much of all the experiences I had on the Planning Commission with you. And I need to call to your attention that things are different now. I'm not serving any board. I don't have any application before you, but I am watching you. I remember the meeting that you showed up and said that no one, you made a new rule over the phone, outside the door, or some other way. It didn't happen at one of our meetings. But a new rule was made that said no planning commissioner could discuss any property that joins them. So because there was a new development going in all the way around me, you tied my hands the whole time. I could not say one word. It didn't matter if it was the properties that were immediately next to my property. It was any property in the whole neighborhood. Yet you've taken action on comprehensive plan issues that affect A.C. Watts, whose property joins the subdivision that joins you. And part of those decisions, as the right arm person of former Mayor Pam Stutz, you protected her by keeping them downplanning them so that the corruption could never come out, that said the homeowners association now owned a third of his property. The homeowners association, of which you are one of those homeowners. So I just want you to know, thank God I'm alive, breathing, and have a wonderful memory, and I'm not going to let it go on. So I expect that action to be cleaned up, because what it amounts to is down planning 3 little measly properties that altogether might be 1 acre, when the whole town was planned from one end to the other, everything fronting on Washington Street, including the subdivision that we had to come in and get down zoned because it was already zoned as commercial. That's all for tonight.
Is there anybody else who'd like to address the council? At this time, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege, Ms. Leonard. Apparently, your memory is not quite as good as mine. Ms. Leonard, you do not have the floor right now. I do, and I'm going to address your comments because you're accusing this body of corruption, and you're accusing the town of corruption. To clarify, Ms. Leonard, you've had your moment. To clarify, there was no new rule made for you.
Oh, it's in my notes.
For those unaware, property owners of adjoining parcels have a conflict of interest problem. property owners who have a contract on the property have a conflict of interest, and I believe that was discussed with you by the town attorney. So I'm not particularly partial to you making a blanket accusation against the town. As to Mr. Watts' property, from the time that I moved here to the present day, that property is and has been zoned residential and was never zoned commercial. The town has not downzoned it, has not taken anything from him, and with regard and it was not downplanned, Ms. Leonard.
Ma'am, please respect the chairman's time.
And, I mean, I'm not going to address it any longer, but your memory is in direct contravention of the minutes, the notes, and what you were told by the town attorney and your own attorneys at the time. So, I mean, I am not going to accept you denigrating the town any further, and if you continue, I'm going to have you removed, Ms. Leonard.
Maybe I'll leave on my own because I can't stand to watch you lie.
Taken.
I will.
Point taken.
And I'll have Syntax attorney correct that lie. No one ever told me that. I'm not going to
I'll-
listen to your lies.
Announcements, do you have any? I have not.
I don't believe so.
The three of us, the Carrolls and myself, will be attending the Planning Commission training session down at Harrisonburg on the 20th and 21st next week.
Oh, excellent. If it's the same one that I took, it's a tremendous class. They got great speakers. There's a lot of good stuff in there, a lot of really good stuff in there. Good. It's a great class.
Looking forward to it.
Definitely.
We look forward to it.
I look forward to it.
Any announcements from that end? All right. ARB update.
Nothing specific, I don't believe. There's more elevations and stuff coming in, but there's nothing definite.
Okay. Town council update?
Yes.
Yes?
I have nothing to report.
Oh, okay. You threw me there for a second. All right. Capital improvement plan, who's presenting?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Town Manager Brian Henshaw is with me this evening. He helps prepare or update the capital improvements program and also the narrative that's accompanying it. Last month, we had provided you the last year's CIP for reference purposes. This is the proposed CIP. Last month, there was a question about adding the quiet zone implementation and signage. You'll notice that has been added under the general government subtext. Is the last line you'll see there, $50,000 in the fiscal years of 2016, 2017, and then 2017, 2018. And then there's some general notes on that item. This was in consultation, I believe, with Councilman Passanello. Also with the police department, last month, I maybe mentioned to you that we're developing a proffer policy for the town. Sorry.
Right.
We have phantom microphones tonight. And that the proffer policy is based heavily on the town's CIP. We don't otherwise provide public service, fire rescue, schools, and the like. And so there was some discussion about some line items for the police department beyond the normal wear and tear and repair of equipment that they use on a yearly basis. So that proffer policy will come to you and will set some minimum costs for various police equipment, some larger items that would be reflected in the CIP. Items below that dollar amount will continue to be reflected in the annual budget. So you'll see that item there as part of the CIP. And then lastly, the museum items as well. There's the accompanying narrative that goes with it. We need to have a public hearing on this. PC does? Okay. So without further explanation by Brian, Mr. Chairman, unless you'd like him to contribute more, we would ask that you schedule a public hearing for next month on this item.
Any objection?
None.
Discussion at this point? Sherry, could you set a public hearing for, I can't see that far, May 11? All right, set a public hearing for the CIP for May 11. We'll address at that point.
Mr. Chairman, the same night I'll also have our consultant that developed our proper policy there. So you'll be able to review that policy in conjunction with the CIP and understand the relationship between the two.
Well in advance of the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Comp plan. Steady as we go.
It is. I'm going to try to jump ahead a little bit to my town planner report at the council meeting.
Before you do, on the comp plan, I had a discussion with several people this morning and this afternoon, and I think one of our concerns with regarding the comp plan, specifically as it applies to Dominion, is sort of coming to fruition. Apparently, there is a learned opinion or multiple opinions that the conservation easement that essentially exists now as the property across the railroad tracks has been transferred to the county.
The Somerset Crossing?
The Somerset Crossing one may or may not prevent Dominion from acquiring an easement through there. Apparently there's something to do with lack of federal dollars and state precedent with regard to power lines being put across property such as that, largely enabled by Dominion's ability to mitigate either through conservation credits, I guess, from other properties or in some other way. So until we get that squared away, I'm not sure where we're going to stand with that. But I thought I'd make you aware of that in case that comes up in a future discussion. Continue.
I've lost my... Do I have a bad touch?
You need Duracells.
Here we are. So during the commission or the council work session and also during their meeting, there was interest in the council in looking at reviewing the land use policies or the planned land use map specific to the three parcels that this Leonard was referring to, that would be Mr. Watt's property and the two other properties that adjoin it, and looking at a transitional commercial designation. What I had offered to the council at the time was that the commission had gone through almost page by page of the document and updating each of the tables, updating the action strategies regards to, for example, moving town center down to Harover. That was no longer a policy of the council. And also mentioned that you were heavily involved in the Dominion discussion and the paperwork or the position paper that was put together. Mr. Ring advised me afterward that part of it too was concern about where those power lines would lay out and how that would affect the land use around it. So the council, so that was a summary of where you were on the review of the comp plan and why that had not moved forward to hearing and to the council for their separate hearing. The council may take up next month a separate initiation of a plan amendment specific to those properties along Washington Street that are now, it's basically between Madison and St. Paul's Drive. If they initiate that, that'll come to you for your review, recommendation, and hearing, and then ultimately back to the council for their review and recommendation. Just mentioned to them that would be an out-of-turn amendment, given the fact that you've not brought forward the comprehensive plan update. We are also working with our on-call planning consultants to do a, no pun intended, comprehensive update of all our planning documents, subdivision ordinance, zoning ordinance, comp plan all at once. They did a diagnostic, which we will share with you, which basically went through state code requirements, trends in the industry, a number of things to go through and see how healthy our documents are, and that's being put together in a work plan. Their initial review is that we can come out with a pretty streamlined document for each of the comp plan, zoning ordinance, and subdivision ordinance. Long way of saying that may, in lieu of you actually providing a formal recommendation on a comp plan update, that may serve in lieu of that. And you may just want to decide to go ahead and pass that over to the consultant to review and bring that forward. That'll probably be within the next year or so. That will allow some of the Dominion stuff to play out. So anyway, I'll follow up with you next month. But again, there may be an item at the commission or a council work session later this month for May, which will discuss a possible initiation of a plan amendment. So, make sense? Okay.
Works for me.
We are continuing to make our way through site plans. It's a busy part of the year. We anticipate probably the ice rink will be ready for you to review next month. This is the redo of their expansion, their final site plan. There were some issues dealing with drainage to the south. We're able to address that. Closely behind it will be the Sheets rebuild, and in tandem with all those will be Robinson's Paradise. This is the rezoning to the north of 66. Did meet with Guy Gravitz. He's a gentleman that represents the ownership of the fairgrounds property. We met last week. They had a retailer come in, a grocer retail wanting to come in. They wouldn't tell me the name, but basically it's in a footprint of about 36,000 square feet. Also wanted so they wanted to amend their plan to include that grocer along Washington Street, and also develop a hotel, possible hotel on the property. That would reduce the total number of units they requested from 120 down to about 87. What happened was we had submitted the traffic impact analysis to VDOT and the county, and we immediately got a response saying they wanted to put that on hold while they revised their plans to accommodate this particular grocer. So
That doesn't require, that doesn't require, what is it, a 527, 529, whatever, they don't require that any longer, correct?
527 or 529 study.
Yeah.
Based on what the study says or what the traffic impact analysis says, will determine whether or not he's a 529. So, what am I missing? So
That'll be interesting at that intersection, given what VDOT's got planned.
correct. And they've, much like Chick-fil-A's has been made aware of those lane configurations and the interchange being changed and the intersection being changed. They've accommodated those changes as well and predicted future traffic volumes based on the planned land use of the area and the interchange. So,
That'll be interesting.
yeah. So, trying to think what else to tell you. Payne Lane across the street, we provided our first referral comments. We had some follow-up meetings regarding some of their tenants. Not heard back from them recently. We expect that fairly soon they're going to go before the ARB to request their demolition permits for those buildings across the street.
Do you think that that's not going to be this Wednesday?
No, sir.
Yeah.
So this, sir, what's going to be for you is the ice rink expansion. They're going to come in with those materials.
Could you provide those referral comments to us, just for our info?
Referral comments on Payne Lane?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
please, thank you.
Okay. So thanks for being patient. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let's proceed with the Hanover Master Plan.
All right, well, we once again like to welcome Barry Carpenter and Lynette, I can never get your last name, Winich, I got it right, to present to you all the Hanover Master Plan. This is basically per the scope of our agreement with Barry and his company, Sempoetica. He was originally going to bring back together a preliminary plan. However, based upon the joint or the stakeholder input forum, we had such good ideas, he actually felt it was important to go into a different direction. So he's actually come up with 3 sketch plans based upon the input, taking into all the account of the various input that we received that evening. One of the things we'll be doing is, and I think it's important to note, is that essentially we tonight is not necessarily a discussion topic. We're going to let Barry present it. After he's done presenting, he actually has a kind of a matrix that sets out the 3 alternatives. That kind of explains them, what you just heard. Then, from that standpoint, he'll take any questions about what he presented. But other than that, we'd like to turn it over to the Planning Commission, to the ARB, and then let each board take it, digest it a little bit, provide comments and recommendations to the council. The council will deliberate over your all's comments and recommendations, and then we'll forward that to Barry. All the comments from both the Planning Commission and the ARB, and then whatever the final comments were from the from the council. At that point, he then would develop the final master plan based upon comments and review.
Do we have that matrix you just mentioned?
I'm going to hand it out. He's going to basically explain it. It basically gives more of a verbal presentation of what he just is going to talk about. One of the things we were going to ask, though, I know this is the Planning Commission meeting. We do appreciate this, but it would be easier just for the setup. He brought boards, and if Planning Commission would be willing to come down here just for the presentation, it'd be helpful for him to. So,
Works for me.
Mr. Chairman, just to confirm that tonight is not expected you guys would deliberate this. We'll bring it back to you next month for your final recommendations.
okay.
hear me?
No.
Is it working?
You're gonna put it way up here too.
What? Is that better? Okay, is that better? I'm sorry, I'm not used to the high-tech stuff, okay? I'm Barry Carpenter. Our firm is Simpletica. We're community planners and designers, and we've done a lot of public planning projects and a lot of private sector projects. And with us is Lynette Winch from Engineering Planning Resources. And she's our building expert, our construction expert, and our budget expert. Seven. Here, I'm going to work this way. It's the eight. Yeah. Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, this is great. Okay. Am I being amplified at all? Okay. We had a good public forum. We had two good-sized groups. You know, you can invite people to a public forum, but you can't make them come, right? So, but we had really two groups which had different tactics in terms of their approach and concepts. But the interesting thing about the public forum was that there was a lot of diversity in ideas, but there were also one strong commonality. So, you know, we had these summaries from each group, and each group had voted on their top 5 ideas. But when you looked at it, you realized that across the top, community park, community use, recreation center, park, those were the words that were umbrellaed across the top of both groups' summaries and top 5s. And then after that, it got to be more granular with different kinds of ideas, different kinds of components, different ways to handle buildings. And so taking that concept and discussing with folks afterwards some ideas, instead of looking at this like there's one answer, I think at this point we have to have a vocabulary. Okay, we have to have a vocabulary on how we want to look at the property, given that it wants to be a civic park space. So what we've done is we went back, and I'll go through these, and we looked at it not as just here's a preliminary plan, because I think it's too soon. I think there's more discussion. But I think you need tools, and what we try to create with 3 alternatives. And essentially the first alternative has a theme, and that theme is Central Park, Garden, and Events. The next one is more assertive, and it becomes a community park and center with kind of a meeting activity approach. The third one is more assertive than that, and it has a community center that has much more fitness and activity in it. So it's scalable. It moves forward. And the handout that I'm looking at here, the reason I'm not handing out here is because the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get down there, you're going to say, how much does that cost? And we have actually put some budget numbers on this. But what I'd like to do, if you please bear with me, is to go over the highlights of the 3 plans. Then we will go through the summary. Hopefully it's notes and roadmap, and begins to sort of give you the whole picture in one piece of paper. I really like that because that's the guy I am. I mean, I like to think like that. So in the baseline, sketch A, this is the Central Park, much more passive in a lot of ways. So just get you oriented. This is Washington Street. That's Coach Way. Light runs right over here underneath all this stuff. And then, I can't remember, is it the Villages or is it Haymarket Station? Dogwood Park Lane is back here. And so in this plan, the primary, and we've looked at different dispositions of the Lewis homes on the site. You know, to me, there are many ways to handle it. We had come forward in the presentation last time and talked about if you fix them up in place, this is what it costs. If you moved them, this is what it costs. If you moved them off-site, this is what might happen. And so we have some of those costs, and we've incorporated that into what the disposition of those properties are. In this plan, which is more the Central Park plan, we have a loop road. And again, this is like 415 feet across this. This is the size of this, and it goes like 450 feet deep. It's 3.5 acres. It's not a huge property, but it's very significant in the town. And it has a hilltop right in here. And the two houses sit along that ridge. So in this one, we have created this loop. And off of that loop directly are parking spaces in these yellow areas, okay? And you go around, and it's connected across the top in front of the two Lewis, I'm calling them Lewis buildings. Heretofore, they were called Sears buildings, but they're actually Lewis Manufacturing Homes. Here, so this loop comes across and goes back down and exits. So we have a nice loop road, and off of that road is a series of parking spaces. We have driveways that go on either side of the hilltop beside the two Lewis buildings. This is currently the pantry building. This is formerly the police building. And they are at the hilltop here. We have here a significant public open-air pavilion. Manassas has a pretty significant pavilion. It's an ice rink, but it'll handle 1,000 people standing up. That's pretty big. This is half that size, and will probably handle 250 people seated at tables, and so it's smaller. And so what we decided was that this is going to be the Central Park in this concept. It's a high green approach, and of course all of the, I don't know if you can see it, but all of these plans will have a loop trail system around the edge and then connecting interior to that. So this building here, I think it's 35 by 80 or 45 by 80. I can't remember the exact number. It's 3,600 square feet, and it's open air. It has on one side a stage and an amphitheater, a green lawn amphitheater, not a hard concrete sort of amphitheater. And so it's multifunction. The idea here is that it's a premier building with good design so that it fits the town motif. You could even put inside of it some ideas such as the stonework that you see at the Lewis homes, some of that beautiful wall kind of work, and sort of tie the buildings together. But this is going to be a taller building, maybe 25 feet clear, or under it, because you're going to have events in there. It's flanked by two lawns so that events can spill out into the lawn areas. And in this summary, I talk about how there's income-producing potential and revenue potential for these kinds of buildings. In Manassas, they use an actually management company that manages the whole process. So as you get into these, there are ways to create revenue. I know that, there was a real sensitivity to not just going to the general fund for everything. Let's see what we can do to be creative, and let's see what we can do to partner. And so some of these facilities, to a greater degree or less degree, offer partnership opportunities with the county, for instance, a public-public partnership, or public-private. And that might be the whole management side, especially when you get into some of the rentals of space. So we have this premier building, but it's really a park building. It has a lot of capacity for events and for rentals. There's a major playground right here. And then the two houses are in the same place. They're renovated. But behind them, we've taken what is now kind of a semi-wooded slope against the residences, and we've shown it as a much more designed arboretum with a wedding chapel, a wedding gazebo. Again, there are so many people. I mean, I can't believe the places that people rent to have their weddings that are not as beautiful as what they're paying for them. So you can really create situations. In the North Fauquier Park, they have some beautiful pavilions up there, a picnic primarily, pavilions, and they rent those, and they're income-producing elements. In this case, we also, there's an array of trees because of the property line between the two houses. Trees grow up on property lines, right? They're protected. And so we tried to save those in there and created a sculpture garden. So this could have a whole art in the park kind of approach. The buildings might have some sort of small gallery. Another building might have service functions for this, extra for this as well as the entire property. And so there would be a high landscape design quality about this whole space. It would be, in fact, a beautiful town park. So in each case, we have stormwater management down here. In this corner, there's already town, I guess, working with VDOT on some drainage that's going down off of the Main Street improvement projects. And so this would be the appropriate place to put that. We would like for that to be like a rain garden. So it's not an ugly, mown, chain link pit. Okay. So this whole place wants to be a beautiful place. The parking lots, we want to see if we can do some forest parking, forest paving for better infiltration. Lynette and her firm are experts at doing those kinds of things. So, there's opportunity for benches and some picnicking in these areas, particularly along the side. I think that's all I'm going to say about that right now, unless can you think of anything I forgot about that? So that's sort of the baseline, and that theme is, Central Park, garden, and events. But it's not just pretty for sake of being pretty. It's also pretty because there's ways to, bring the community together and also generate revenue. The theme for B, which is a step up and a little bit more intensive, is community center / meeting. It's a smaller community center. This is, and it's right along the frontage. It would be a LEED. Everybody wanted LEED quality buildings. I said LEED gold, not platinum, but gold. And 7,000 square feet here. It sets right along the street, becomes a part of the future streetscape, and it's going to be a really nice, maybe masonry or wood with stone elements, again, to be in a park setting. We have a single access drive that extends up and loops around the top of the hill here, and parking is set along that drive as well as in a kind of consolidated lot really close to the center. Outside the center, we have an area for hard surface courts. There was discussion about multipurpose. But at the same time, there was some discussion about a pool. It was a bit lukewarm. That's not a joke, lukewarm pool. But I mean, it was a little bit, some discussion about a pool, but it was kicked around back and forth. So in this case, you could replace this area with a small pool, but it wouldn't be an Olympic-sized pool. That would change the dynamic of how this building gets used. So it would go from sort of a meeting focus and sort of a service focus to much more of a pool-related element in there. So there's sort of a sub-option where this becomes ability to have meetings, public meetings, and courses and educational courses, outdoor play here, but not a pool. And then a subset would be to put the pool in and reconfigure the interior of this building. Again, it would be LEED. It's 7,000 square feet. It would be a nice building. In this building, if anybody was here, I'm sure a lot of people were here, obviously, for the presentation we made. Where the Lewis home sits now, that formerly was the police headquarters, sits right on the top of the hill, and it is, in fact, the highest point in the town. I think that's fairly significant. And so how do you celebrate it? There's two things going on. The police building of the two is in the least lesser better shape, okay? And so we want to think about, here's our issue. When you're looking at intensifying the use or reclaiming the hilltop, these buildings are just sort of equidistant apart, sitting within their own lots. But if we take our master planning wand and we take the police station and move it on the other side of the pantry building and cluster them up, much like they would really be in a kind of a small town setting. I mean, these buildings were usually in tight neighborhoods. So we renovate both of them, but we move one, then renovate it over here. That frees up this hilltop to be a major kind of hilltop green and with a small amphitheater there, a gazebo landscaping again back here, but not to the level of an arboretum-like level. You know, the thing about these kind of parks and arboretums is you can get a lot of volunteerism. You can get master gardeners involved. You can get volunteers. You can get friends of the park. We've done a lot of parks, and almost always there's a Friends of the Park group. And the main thing you have to do with the Friends of the Park group is keeping them from going too crazy because they want to really help. We did a small park called Rady Park in Warrenton, and the Rotary Club built a really nice picnic pavilion in it. And as soon as it opened, every other service club wanted to build a picnic pavilion in the park. And we said, well, you know, it's only a small park. So there are a lot of opportunities for certainly rentals for those kind of things. These would be sort of community classroom type spaces and meeting space up here. But this would be much more active, potentially, in this core right here. Again, you know, loop trail system. We could measure the trail system so that you could have a quarter or a half mile length, and so people could walk the circuit. And because we have interweaving of trails, I hope you can see them. If you can come up here later and look at them, you know, there are all kinds of options. So here we celebrate it much more formally in the back. Here it's a little more informal with the energy of the landscape being here. And we have two different looks. You know, now we're starting to move the buildings around, the existing buildings. Okay. As we get on the other end of the spectrum, the thing about the community, the public forum was that it looked like there was a dichotomy, and we had this kind of capstone of you know what everybody was in agreement on, which is really pretty important that people agreed on it, right? But as you descended down into some of the comments, you had a little bit more diversity and divergence. So that's why we need to look across a spectrum. So we're not just looking at one thing and we're going to, you know, I want this and you want that kind of an approach. We want to be able to kind of be selective about the components. So in C, this was a community center / fitness. Here we actually take both of the buildings and they are moved off-site. In this scenario, they're moved off-site, and in the cost we'll give you, it's assumed that they are moved off-site at no cost to the town, but you don't get any money for it. So the idea is to save them, but save them somewhere else, and it offers the flexibility of taking more of the site for our new work, the purpose-built facilities that you guys all talked about. I think I know what that means. So here we actually have, on the highest point in the town, a new community center of around 16,000 square feet. This is scaled in a way that you can actually put a gymnasium in there with a lot of different functions. You can have expos in it. You can have a fitness center in it. So it's much more assertive on the potential for recreation. It's an active approach. And, you know, we have a lot of opportunity there for classes and fitness club, you know, memberships. And in this particular case, on this end, you know, we have a terrace that comes out so that if you have an event, you'll have a terrace that goes out and looks out over the green in the back. To the west of it, where the other Lewis home was, we have created a really beautiful picnic pavilion. And this is 2,400 square feet. The ones, it's about the same size as most of the ones over in the North Fauquier Park, a little smaller, but a different kind of configuration. But it sits within this circle, and it has, you know, a small plaza so that you can bleed events out onto the ground when the weather is good, and then a small playground as well, so that if you have a reunion, you know, you've got that all right there in a very tight spot. And the primary parking is along the frontage. So here we've kind of reclaimed this hilltop, but done some beautiful civic buildings on it, and parked more cars down here because we do need some parking. Okay, these again would be nicely done parking lots with good landscaping, and of course the parking, you know, requirements for parking lots. I mean, you guys have been really pushing and being successful at getting better looking parking lots in town. So this would have to be the gold standard for that kind of development. Again, green space in the back, loop around here, opportunities for rentals and fee-driven things. Both of these, this one and this one, have real opportunities for, well, I think, a public-public venture. This is where you would need to speak with the county and get a feel for how this fits into their master plan for recreational facilities, and whether they would be interested in partnering, if you're interested in partnering with a smaller center or step it up a little bit, okay? And that's going to help you on the bottom line, because as you step forward from that to this, you're getting into more management and staff needs as well, because you've got to really focus on managing these buildings, and you're going to have people who know how to run those programs. And so the county has, every good-sized county has that kind of capability, but it would be a joint project. So I've tried here to give an array of ideas and an array of ways to look at the site without saying one is correct. And I'd like to give this out. What I've done is I've created a summary comparison matrix, kind of a matrix kind of guy, which is a little scary because they can be a little deadly. But and so what I've tried to do here is do a summary, so you don't really have to take as many notes. You can notate this. And the left-hand column is the key plan and program elements. And then we have the three alternatives spanning across. So without going through this in super detail, the headers are, what's the main theme? We've talked about those for the different alternatives. How are the Lewis homes treated in each alternative? In the first one we kept both in place, then we moved one in the second one, then we were saying, okay, in this option we're removing them from the site. What kind of access does it have? What kind of parking does it have? The pedestrian environment, what kind of things are in the pedestrian systems for these, and then what kind of special activities are happening. And that's where we talk about the pavilions, the different size community centers, what kind of things would be in there, and then specifically what might be in the Lewis homes under adaptive reuse. But I will say that, this is pretty early. You're going to have to get into that a little bit. I mean, those buildings are built for residential use, not for, big meetings, but they could have small meetings, and actually, in some of these, they could have an outdoor space. You could have your master gardeners work on that. You could have educational classes there as well. So I also added something about partnership potential, which I just spoke about, and I really think that all of these have some partnership potential. I think when it comes to event space, that you want to feel like you're partnered up with somebody who's a good manager. And in the case of Manassas, they have a company that they've actually hired to help manage that property and do all that. You should visit it. I'm trying to think if it's a Marshall. I can't remember the name of the actual facility, but it's the Manassas facility. Brian and I talked about what can we do early on in each of these plans to have some first steps. We all know that if you're going to do something, you're going to do it in phases. And by the way, these are all phaseable. And when we do the preferred plan that you guys are going to create the elements for, we're going to try to make that a creative plan, and we're going to give you a phasing strategy. All right. But early on, you can do things in each one of these alternatives that will claim this as the town park, that will start people using this property, that will allow you to put some parking, some driveways, a playground or a picnic area or a pavilion in. And I'm not sure whether you can actually start with a gravel or some kind of stone lot, or maybe you can. Maybe there's a
Parking?
Yeah, I mean maybe, but there may be an LID approach that you just do it. Low impact development. Excuse me. So in each case, and I put these on here. First of all, in this one, you would upgrade the buildings. That's one thing you could start to do. You could start your access drive on this side and develop this playground. which would be a fairly significant amenity recreationally. And then this area, which is going to have this beautiful pavilion in it in the long run, could be a nice, just mown green space, and put a trail in. You can't say enough that putting a nice trail in with just that much will make this a park. It'll make it a park. It'll make it a community facility. In B, the small community center, we would again move one of these buildings and fix them up, and then maybe do the small playground over here and some parking along in here. It's possible that you could do more parking and then do the play facility, the hard surface courts, without doing a full-blown community center there. And then the last one, you would try to sell the buildings, the two Lewis homes, and have them removed to another site. Or you would work whatever deal you could to do that. And you would probably put some qualifications on it that they would be treated properly, but that maybe it costs $1. Maybe that's what it costs, but the moving and all that is somebody else's thing. So you could begin to do that and begin to do maybe this pavilion here. And in all cases, green space. Like that might just be a mown area up here. Here this would be a mown area, and part of this. So you'd have outdoor informal green spaces, and you would have your trail systems to knit it all together. We have looked at comparable prices for different kinds of centers and different kinds of pavilions, and I would not be frightened, but we have $2.8 million down here for full-blown, loaded construction budget. We're calling these budgets because it's a CIP thing. We're not there yet. We can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but you can see $2.4 million down here, and this one 3.9, and this one 7.2. But we're getting into some serious architecture here. But at the same time, you're getting into a longer term, maybe more income potential at the same time. It's in your chart. It's at the last column. It's a $7,255,000. And we treat the I'm going to say that we treat the budget numbers seriously. We've looked at comparables, and I've done a lot of master plans, and you would not believe, the level of money it takes to build a public building. It's like 150, 200, 250, 300, depending on whether you have pools inside of them and things like that. There are a lot of requirements. We've also loaded the numbers so that we did the hard budget numbers first, and then we added contingency, we added soft costs, insurance, contractor stuff, and we added, what else did we add? Engineering fees. Yeah, that's right. Well, of course you would remember that. She's an engineer. So these numbers are not intended to be, easy numbers. They're intended to be realistic within the marketplace. So what I would like to leave you with is that if you can look at these as some strong concepts, which I think there are overriding park concepts in each one that are sort of in every one of these. But then that you have components that you can begin to use to select from, maybe resize them, and create a preferred master plan program. So that's the intent of these, is to give you a vocabulary and some components that will fit on this site that hang together with strong concepts, and that really adhere to the main topic that you guys set forth, that it's a public park green use. And then, everything else got a little fuzzy. So we're trying to give you some vocabulary for that. I don't think I can say much more, but I've got specific questions. Sure.
So the entryways area use the same configurations we have today?
Oh, well, the entrances are going to be new entrances. The key thing is that you want to align a primary interest across from Coach, because you want you don't want to stagger it. You get that weave problem when you're making a left turn. So that's about a 30-foot wide entrance there, which is kind of a typical entrance. It's actually not as wide as some of them are for commercial uses. And that, we're showing maybe a little green strip in the middle here as you get in, and then it becomes, a driveway all the way through here. And that's like 25 feet wide, so it's more spacious than a typical parking lot aisle because it is your main circulation. In this one, similarly again, but as you get up to here, actually, I forgot to mention this, you service this parking lot and this parking lot with a two-way system, but at this point, this becomes a one-way, kind of a little smaller, minor loop, so it's trying to be a little more residential, a little more light on the touch. So it's not going to have all the grading requirements that some of the others would have. And again, similarly here. The only other, I think, that's the only one that has a second entrance in it. And I put that in to show how a loop would work. And I tried to locate that so that we had some distance from this Blight intersection.
And then I'm going to ask an opportunity for question just for process. So when I bring this to the commission next month, as the planner, the expectation would be, and the ARB, that they look at the common elements. I guess there's not to say that it's not to say that they couldn't mix elements as necessary, but ultimately come up with their recommendations for the council, and then the council will, I guess, make some general high level. I'm mindful of what we did for the town center master plan, which I think is nice to see here, where it had some strong elements for each, but there was ultimately a blending of them with the end game. So just want to confirm that that was the expectation for the commission and the ARB.
Josh, I got you.
The other
Joe.
thing let me just interject that the other thing that I think you can start to see is that when you start to put this much programming on the site, you're starting to use up the site. And that, I actually started to say, I'm going to draw a big building that goes all the way across the top of this thing. I couldn't support that building. I couldn't get close to the building. I felt like it was up on the hill. And so I tried to right-size this. And that's why we have the counterpoint of the very active building and then this beautiful pavilion that you drive in, and that's what you see up on the hill.
Hey, Barry, can you hear me? Oh.
Sure.
Great ideas, great concepts. Looks like you put in a lot of work there. One of the things I'm curious about, and I think you alluded to in your presentation, was operating costs. You didn't get into it too deeply, but I'm just wondering, I gather from the passive to the more aggressive, it's going to be higher. That would be an element I think I'd like to know relative to what it would.
I think we could probably give you some comparables. I know I've read about it. It's not really something that we specialize in, but I think we might be able to get some comparables because as you get into the pool, the outdoor pool, that's just going to, there's all kinds of health department rules and things like that, and you got to keep everything right. But it really gets down into managing the more intensive uses and what kind of staff you might have to have for that. I think we might be able to get some rules of thumb, but I think the county actually probably has all that. And Fairfax County would have a really good, Fairfax County Park Authority, they would have a really good handle on different level facilities, and so that it would be kind of a research thing. Not something people are hired to do that, to do staffing plans. And as a matter of fact, I can recommend somebody who can do that, who can actually program that building down to every doorknob, But I think we have so many things to talk about and think about, and you do, that we're not quite there yet.
Well, yeah.
But I assume you are correct in your assumption as you go this way. That it gets more intense in terms of management. I'm sorry.
Two quick questions.
Yeah.
First one, I do like the fact that you have an entrance and an exit on Plan A. Plan B and C kind of lack it, and from an aesthetic perspective, I can see why you wouldn't want to have a service road coming out, say, on Blight. But for Plan C, if you have a service road that kind of comes out of the rec center, this way you have people loading and unloading in an emergency evacuation in the event that they can't get down to Washington Street, I think it would be a great idea to kind of put into the foreplay. And the second part of that, too, is that with the community center at the top, I'm guessing that's roughly about 75 to 100 feet from the adjacent.
I I think that's 50 feet.
Up northbound from the tip of
here?
the house to
Yeah,
the
it's-
adjacent
it's 100
neighborhood.
plus feet.
I grew up in a planned community, and I probably lived about 600 feet from a community center similar to that size that had a pool. There wasn't really a lot of issues in terms of noise for the most part. So one thing we'd have to consider too is, how late do we have the events? What kind of ordinances, are in play, and do we need to maintain those? So from my perspective, that's one thing I'll look at. The other thing too is, with the parking lot down there, is that spec based on number of or occupancy limits for the building you proposed, or?
Well, it's really kind of a capacity of the site to handle it.
Okay.
And also looking at the zoning ordinance here. It's not been fine-tuned, but I don't think you could push that too much harder. The key thing to remember is there is no pool assumed in this building.
Right.
If you were to have an activity in there, it would be a high school gymnasium level court, wouldn't possibly cross courts, but it would be a multi-use building, and you could have fitness around the edges and support some lockers, that kind of thing. But that is not trying to be. Now, when you get into the pools interior, you're into the 50,000 square feet buildings, or if you go really up there, you get pools and gyms. It's 90,000 square feet,
Yeah.
and they're big, and they need a bigger site.
Understood.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying, because here, we're trying not to. We don't want to take this whole top down. We don't want to take the whole top of the hill down. We want to be respectful of our neighbors as much as possible, and we're going to have future neighbors here, and they're actually going to help pay for some. That developer is supposed to help pay for some of this landscaping. So as you get your site plan done, as you move forward, I would suggest you revisit that and have them contribute to your plan, and so that you get a little more bang for the buck on how that. It's not just that you're going to have them buffer you, but that they're going to contribute to the beauty of the place, and you have your master plan, so they know what you're doing, But those are good comments.
Yeah, and just because you did bring it up, there are going to be 5 houses along Blight Drive. And yeah, they are going to pay for the landscaping, but it's going to go on town property. So same thing in the back. One other comment about that is the last time there was public input on this, there was great hue and cry about paths being back there and crime and kids and all that kind of stuff. The town had the opportunity to do it at one time, and then the town decided not to do it because of that. That's history. The other thing, my concern mostly, though, is utilization. So in that we have, when you're talking about rental spaces, I understand the wedding gazebo, that's kind of cool. But when you're talking about renting barbecue or picnic areas, in that we're in a mostly suburban location as opposed to an urban location. And most of the lots around here, other than the townhome lots, I mean, they're quarter acre or smaller, some of them. Really so I'm not a big fan of you will build it and they will come. I don't believe that. What's the utilization of spaces like this, given the suburban nature of the surrounding community, and not just the town of Haymarket, because Haymarket can't support that space. It's got to be the larger, let's say, the mailing address of Haymarket, which is much larger than the town itself. So just like the numbers that you came up with, is there any kind of utilization statistics on, for suburban density that we have here, what typically can be a revenue stream or what is successful?
Well, I don't have the answer to that, but I'm glad you brought it up, because what you don't see here are a lot of large picnic pavilions.
Right.
But interestingly enough, even though you're in a suburban area and you're in a suburban-like county, fringy suburban, you still have these parks that have these amazing, fairly good-sized pavilions for groups. They're group-oriented, reunions, ball teams, things like that. So really, what we don't have here are a lot of little, like town people would come here and have a picnic. It would be a group. It would be a larger group that would come and have an event. So, but I guess, the intent is not to make this into a county park like the one at North Park here.
Right.
But these specialized buildings, especially like that pavilion there or this pavilion here, they're going to be attractive, and they're going to be for that intermediate size event. Okay, and they're revenue producing. But I don't think we're going to we haven't really talked about a lot of picnicking in here. I didn't mean to. You know.
Okay, well, it's just, it's a term that you put out there, and I'm like,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Sometimes I'm
what comes to
talking, you know, and
utilization,
I
yeah.
just get on a roll, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, if it is larger groups, like you're saying, ball clubs or, you know, sports organizations or large family reunions or something like that, that helps me understand what the target of this is, as opposed to a family coming in and doing a barbecue, which is, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm familiar with Vienna. I grew up in Great Falls Park.
Okay.
I know the demographic there. I know the space there, that kind of thing. So,
Right. Well, I think it's going to actually, instead of being a chore, I think this is really kind of an interesting nut to crack. You know, as to what does the town want to participate in? What does the town want to attract here? Certainly it's for town people, but, you know, this thing is not going to work just with town. But I'm always amazed when I come to Haymarket and when I look at a map, what is going on at your doorsteps. I mean, you have just got such a context to be within that I think, I mean, the fact that you've got businesses that are converting old industrial buildings to recreation, private recreation kind of uses, because you've got this great wealth of clientele around you, it speaks well. Your location is great. You
yeah,
got a great
and
location.
that was kind of in the back of my mind. We've got a lot of recreation in the town. How are our businesses going to feel about municipal recreation? I don't know. It's just,
We always
it's just
have
something
that
you
question.
know, yeah.
We do state parks, and nobody likes it when we put a campground in the state park. You know, so.
For me, I like the first one. A couple things come to mind. I think it looks a lot more balanced, looks a lot more green. I like the pavilion. It's kind of the center point. And thinking about weddings and stuff, we work with a lot of young adults. And a lot of these young adults in this area are traveling way out of town for weddings, and there's really nothing in this area. So my question is, you know, the town has done summer concert series with the pavilion. If you took those two homes, whatever you call them, I have my own private opinion because I look at them every day out my back window.
Okay.
And they don't look too antique to me. But anyway, if you were to take that and eliminate that with your like little chapel green space in the back, and you were to put like a building up there, like
that building?
Like some type of fellowship hall, big open area where you could have it, that property would be usable in the spring and summer, also the fall and winter. It seems like to me with the gyms, I'm afraid if we have like gyms, it's going to just become another elementary school rec center where the people in the town are going to get pushed out for GMBL and all these other rec leagues, where this, I could almost see this producing a lot of revenue, where that might produce revenue, but your cost to maintain it, you probably have to double your town staff to keep up with it. So I'm not sure how cost effective
I think,
that would be.
you know, as you get into these things, you know, it makes it partnering with a county or much more attractive because they have all the systems set up. But at the same time, you know, is it, and I am not a citizen here, but is it a Haymarket facility? I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Is it a town place?
Well, having been in the school system and working a lot with the county, Parks and Rec, I personally wouldn't be in favor of partnering with them because I guess I know too much on that end, so I'll pass.
Oh, they're all fine people. Everything I've ever heard of. They're fine.
I like Josh's idea about a side exit onto Blight at some point because it all comes into Washington Street, and you could definitely have more gridlock. Plan C seems to really have excessive amount of parking in terms of a green space master plan. To me, when I look at it, I say like a third of it seems to be cars, even if it's aesthetically created. And I presume it's posited on making money from the other building, but then I would question whether what we want. Plan C also does away with the food pantry, as I see it, right?
Plan C moves both of the buildings off-site. So whether the food pantry is relocated is not really part of this.
Right.
But I do hear what you're saying about what this is. This is much more of a site development. I mean,
Right.
you know, it's not light. It's not so light in the front yard. You know,
Yeah, it's just not green
But-
space. If you look across the road, it's cars.
but it has a lot of other things going on too. So it's a balancing thing, you know, and maybe some of these components get switched around.
And I like the idea of all the trails, but then I question the trails in the back in lighting and safety and usage, because when people want to walk on trails, they want to be aware that they're in a safe area, and it's hidden over the hill. So just sort of throwing some ideas. And are those roads all paved? The parking roads, the circles, and the...
These would be paved, the lighter color. The sand color would be a porous paving, so it wouldn't be asphalt.
Okay.
Help me out. Yeah, it might be just interlocking blocks, which are designed to hold the weight of a vehicle,
Right.
but you have water infiltrate between them. You know, something to think about. We typically don't recommend lighting in these areas at night because then it becomes an attractive nuisance. You know.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, but I'm just saying, if you light it, then you've got to police it. And you should, this is all about park management, and, you know, you should think about
Right.
park closes at dusk, that kind of thing. So it's good for the neighbors. It also doesn't invite people to be down there.
And last comment, I just really love the idea of the high point of the town being somehow being made special, the way you did that. I think that's...
Very quickly, what is the approximate number of cars you could actually park in those?
It's on the
They're
matrix.
on your sheet. It's interesting. Yeah. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this is going to give you some things to work with, you know, to have fun with. I know Bob's excited, aren't you, Bob? I can tell you are. So we're going to be folding my tent for about a month. I'm actually moving. And so I think this is a great time for you guys to work on this and have it all worked out. And then I'll come back and help. So.
Barry, so commissioners and ARB members, so for next month,
What do you get to you and microphones?
I don't know. So on the commission, the commission's role is the advisory board to the council on land use matters and policies. What I can do, I assume that next month we'll bring these three illustratives, we'll bring the summary charts, and then we'll have the summary that Barry first put together of the stakeholders meeting. What I'll provide to you is the applicable policies that apply. Many of the town's policies are prevalent in each one of these plans. And from what I get with Barry, that these are not solidified. There's some ability to incorporate elements that you like. So, commissioners, I'll bring that to you next month with those advisory policies in mind. ARB, same thing. Probably not this week. At your meeting next month, we'll bring it back to you, and that'll be again what are the relevant code requirements and your design guidelines and policies with regards to all those matters, historic district. And then I would assume we'll work with you to put your summary recommendations together, and we'll get them to Barry. So, thanks. And the council.
I'm going to give him a digital copy of these. They'll print out easy at 11 by 17, and they'll be very readable. And we're leaving all these with you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Barry.
Oh, yeah, well, feel free, go crazy. I mean, and then I'll tell you that, I'm sorry, you can't do that. That won't fit. Well, thanks a lot, folks. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Appreciate you coming in.
I'm glad you do. How do I turn that off? How do I turn it off? Is there a button?
No, that's why, I don't remember how long ago it was that this went in front of the town. But it was 2 years. 2 years? More than that, wasn't it? Okay, so.
No, Pam's told me, you're right.
Yeah, yeah. So
All right.
4 years, something like that, yeah. And the guys that lived back there came up and said no. I mean, universally said no. We don't want trails back there. And it didn't happen.
I don't see it as a big change.
Marchand.
You heard his name.
Marchand. Okay. All right, Mr. Schneider, last item on the agenda is the St. Paul special use permit application. And just as a matter of disclosure, it was brought up earlier about my discussion outside the town hall with another commissioner, and it was notifying him that I was bringing in my zoning code book with regard to this particular item and nothing else.
Do you want me to walk you through it, or are you gonna...
Yeah, I do. Could you, but I do want you to do something for me.
Yes, sir.
Could you walk us through first the historic timeline and just a thumbnail? I mean, I don't want to hear the gory details, but when it's due for renewal.
Certainly. First of all, I need to disclose that my daughter attends this preschool. I do not have a financial interest in the organization. I do feel that I can provide the commission a unbiased analysis of it. So I disclose that for the record. Mr. Chairman, the school was two things. One, it was converting the, rectory, St. Paul's Rectory, to a school, and then separate special use permit for the classroom trailers. The permit had a, termination several years ago, I believe, and they came back last year and petitioned the council to extend the duration of the trailers and the school use through 2017, which would be their final phase of moving everyone from their Fayette Street campus to the old former Pace West School. St. Paul's also in the interim has been changed to St. Michael's. They're changing their name of that. So in here you'll see, Mr. Chairman, behind the letter are the conditions of approval that were applicable to that. The council required them to come back to the town on a yearly basis to grant further extensions of the use. But again, they're asking that the timeline continue to be extended until 2017. The conditions deal with a number of things, deal with a number of children that are permitted. There was a waiver for a number of requirements at the time it was established: hours of operation, traffic management, site access, removal of the classroom trailer, and enforcement. So I'll provide this complete package to you next month. In the interim, I have gotten some calls about gravel coming out on Fayette Street. I believe Councilman Morris brought that up last month. On a daily basis, when I drive through and drop my trail off, the parking lot's in pretty bad condition. Winterham across the street had issues with stacking of cars waiting to go through the pickup and drop-off. They were to be doing that down at St. Paul's church parking lot. They were also parking across the street on the Payne Lane property next to the Colonel's house. It's all fenced in. So I did remind the applicant again that they are not to be parking over there or staging at Winterham. They're supposed to be basing all their operations down at the church parking lot. So other than that, Mr. Chairman, I'm just simply going to revise the conditions of approval to reflect an additional time period unless the commission recommends otherwise.
So what action are you requiring of us tonight, or is this simply
I'm sorry, schedule a public
item?
hearing. It requires a new public hearing. So schedule a public hearing for next month along with the CIP.
I'll address my concerns then. Without objection, I'll instruct the clerk to schedule a public hearing for next month. No objections. Jerry, would you please handle that? Do you have understanding how long I've been dealing with this in its various iterations? Do you have actual written complaints to that effect, or to those effects that you just enumerated, or is that simply word of mouth? Or?
That's always been word of mouth directed to me from the various ownerships.
And when does Winterham 2 begin construction? Now that you mentioned that, that's going to be contentious, to say the least, with construction traffic and
That was, they were supposed to begin, actually, they went out to bid. The bids were opened, I think, this month. I did hear from the ownership, the price was a little higher than they had anticipated. So I'm not sure if that's going to delay construction or not. Their issue right now is that they're rehabbing the Winterham house. You may have noticed Dominion's been out there extending power. They're putting new water lines in. They're getting ready to landscape the exterior, paint the exterior. There's got a lot of activity going on there, and they don't wish to accept the liability. So the special exception actually has a plan in place to do that. It'll be a question of enforcement. So, just reminding them as part of this process that you are to hear that these projects are coming to fruition, and you do need to adhere to that plan. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
That's okay. Along the same lines, this is an extension through next year, correct?
Through 2017, 2 years.
2 years?
July of 2017.
the original.
Yeah.
We don't have the ability to override that.
We can only do 1 year.
No, we can't.
Yeah, we can only do 1 year.
Well, what the requirement was, they had to come back on a yearly basis.
Okay.
What they're disclosing is their intent is to be out of there by 2017.
Okay.
But they have to come back on a yearly basis to review their operations and things that have changed and what's happening.
Seems like the year-out date grows every year. I have a more curious about the impact of Payne Lane than I am Winterham. Do we have a soonest possible date that the Payne Lane property may or may not begin their renovation and construction? Because as I recall from the site plan, or at least from what they've got approval on, they're responsible for Payne Lane improvements, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I'm kind of curious what the impact is going to be, both on, depending on construction date, usage and usability of the St. Paul site once they start construction on Payne Lane.
So the point, I guess the worst-case scenario would be that they would reduce it down to 1 lane. Again, the traffic management plan requires them to stage.
It is only 1 lane.
Well, to the point that they're having to improve it to a 2-lane facility, a true 2-lane facility. So again, it would be just requiring them to fall back on the traffic plan that they're supposed to be following, queuing people up, bringing people through.
Which we've never adequately enforced to date, as is evidenced by the continuing complaints. But
Well, as the zoning administrator, yes, I have not officially, other than just seeing the principal when I'm dropping my littlest one off and getting the, sorry, never mind, I'm on public record. Anyway, just.
Understood.
When they see me, they realize who I represent, and I tend to get acknowledged as such. So I'm constantly a reminder of what they're supposed to be doing.
All right. We'll see that next month then?
Yes, sir.
Any further business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion. What?
Motion to adjourn?
Could I make one comment?
Certainly.
Part of the downtown plans are so complicated. I would love some sort of a matrix that shows start dates for the different aspects, so that when questions come up, for example, with this new St. Michael's, we could just look at this grid and at least visibly see how things will interact traffic-wise and complication-wise, or maybe that's the way I would like to see it. I'm just throwing that out there, if we could get something like that.
Can you accommodate that?
Sure. Well, I provide a summary to the council every month. I can provide that with you as well. The challenge right now is the site plans aren't approved yet.
But even maybe to have it as a chart here,
Understanding what's in process.
so that we could even if you could move it around, I know that's sort of a whiteboard plan, that because these are movable things, we understand that, but all of our questions have to do with how do we fit this jigsaw together.
Understood. What I can do is provide you maybe a map of the town with the project names and a table of their status or review. I can do that for you.
I agree. There are a lot of moving parts, and it changes every month. So, this month, it is what it is. Next month, it could be something completely different. And maybe having that on a monthly basis moving forward, at least for this immediate area in town center, would be very very beneficial for us.
Sure. I have to do that to keep track of everything, so I certainly don't expect you to keep track of that.
And maybe also something visible for this room, so that if somebody in town were to come, they could also look. So sometimes we walk through town and we look like a chart. I know that seems simplistic, but it helps people understand what's coming in town, because there's so many things at once.
Yes, ma'am, I can do that for you.
Right.
But I would definitely make a disclaimer that this is for informational purposes only.
Absolutely.
Because it is, I mean,
It's a moving target.
welcome to the planning commission.
Absolutely. I totally get what you're saying, Ralph, but
And I did have one additional question. I think Brian could probably answer this better than you can. Do we have an active SharePoint site that we can collaborate on for the different boards?
I'm sorry, what?
A SharePoint site?
I must not know what that is, because I don't know what it
SharePoint
is.
is based, okay. We do have a 365-based email system, and part of the packages or accessories that could be included in that and such would be accessibility for SharePoint collaboration. Essentially, it could be a document repository, all digitalized, that we would all have access to for sharing documents, maybe expediting any updates to agendas.
And we would all have to get a Microsoft 365 account through the town to tie into that, correct?
We do have a 365 account. We just don't have the updated license to accommodate for it.
We still have to download it individually,
No,
correct?
it's all online. So all you have to do is log into, instead of mail.office365.com to go to the webmail, you go to whatever the SharePoint address is for the town of Haymarket. So, like I said, it's just an idea that I'd love to incorporate, to help us expedite and be more in tune with what's going on.
Make the graphic presentations much easier.
I'll even design it for free.
oh,
I'll provide my services.
Anything else?
I guess the larger question would be, is everyone up for using that technology? Sure, okay.
Even the Luddite will use it. Me.
I have a question, and I guess we come to you all. Do we have the capacity to go back in time and create a time? The AC Watts property seems to continually be something that the planning commission talks about, the town council's discussed it. I mean, Ms. Leonard's come here on several occasions. Do we have the ability to go back in time with public records and find out what dates it was talked about, what was discussed? Seems to be a lot of confusion. I know he came in with his son, I believe, back in the fall. And, just thinking about the way the town's configured, the kind of scaling down the further you get to the, north. Because I think it's something we need to resolve. It seems like every time we come, we just kind of punt it. We need to come sometime.
Actually, I'll be quite frank with you. It's never been punted. It's been addressed, and it's been addressed, and it's been addressed a half a dozen times over the last 12 years. And the answer is the same every time. It's just that answer is not satisfactory to a very small subset of people. And I mean, I'm more than happy to task Marchant with putting that together. However, be aware that it's more than simply the town. There are other moving parts to it in terms of the HOA and ownership of the property that we don't control or have the records to. But from a land use aspect, from a planning aspect, from a zoning aspect, yeah, we can put that all together. It'll take some time because we have to go back literally to 2000 and.
Well, I'm not saying it's something that you can maybe necessarily pull together, and we have two big things coming out. I guess, looking at that property, having walked around on it, by it on the Earth Day, which I thought was a great event, I would think if it was changed to commercial, there would be very limited things that could go there because of setbacks and parking and,
you're correct.
What size. But at the same time, if it could be like an attorney's office, I don't know, I guess it could be any number of things.
Well, and I think there are a couple of issues here. One, the contention that it's upgraded, downgraded, whatever it happens to be, the zoning map really hasn't changed that dramatically on that piece of property, I think, since it was originally zoned.
No.
So I don't, if you look at the historical zoning of it, it really hasn't changed.
Right.
If you go back and take a look at all of the discussion that has occurred, then you're going to get very, very, very subjective. And that town, and that piece of property has been discussed any number of times. And before I was on any of the boards, the big fear one time was that there was going to be a 7-Eleven going there. Just like one of the big, seriously.
Which was threatened.
Which was correct, yeah, which was threatened, and it was real. Just like putting the crematorium in next to the vet. That was very, very real. It could have happened. A 7-Eleven could go on that corner. And during that iteration, that's what killed it. So putting together a dialogue or a history of the dialogue, you're going to find that, first of all, extensive, and again, somewhat subjective. But I think if you take a look at the comprehensive plan and you take a look at the way it was zoned, the way it has always been zoned.
And the content of the multiple public hearings.
Yeah.
Now, from a planning and zoning going forward, I'm not just trying to sell SharePoint, but there is versioning on there as well. So you can go back to previous versions or iterations of a document or a plan or anything that we conceived during meetings to go back and say, oh, we did mention this or we did cover this, and this was the end result.
The end result is that it's never changed. You know, it started out as X, and it's
X.
Years later, still X.
I'm
After
saying-
many, many, many public hearings.
I'm saying X could become Y. It doesn't always have to stay X.
No,
It doesn't, but there should be a good reason for it to
Right.
change.
I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just saying I think it would be helpful for me to see the timeline, the previous discussion, you know, from your standpoint, you know, based upon the new CIP and all that, you know, what could go in there, you know, what is permissible. I just think it would be healthy.
Well, what's permissible? Once you change it to commercial, it's wide open.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I hear you asking for a chronology. I can do a chronology of the zoning in the plan land use. I think most people forget the zoning ordinance wasn't established until 1983.
Right.
So back then, Haymarket was kind of a hodgepodge of uses and
Well, 83 still takes it back, 30 years or whatever.
correct. So I can provide you a chronology, and what in my review of those documents is that it's the zoning and the plan land use of that property has pretty much remained unchanged throughout. I can provide you that chronology. I can provide you the discussion. I think last time we revisited it in detail was during the 2008 plan update. But I think there needs to be some distinction between the plan land use and the zoning. I think what everyone's talking about is just the land use map. What is the long-range goal in the plan? All that simply does is gives the council the ability, when they review a rezoning request, in other words, simply planning, Mr. Watts had his plan land use to transitional commercial. He still has to submit a rezoning. He still has to submit a site plan. I mean, there's a number of steps that still have to come through the planning commission, the council, before he can actually turn that to a
Right.
commercial use.
But I'm saying if we did, I don't know why it's echoing. If we did a chronological and we went to him, the planning commission talked about, the town council collaborated on it, right? If in fact this is what you want to do, here are the clear delineated steps that you have to do to walk through to
Yes,
make it happen, because I don't know, I don't know the whole history. I think for me it would be helpful to see.
Chronology.
I just think it would be helpful, and then we could discuss it. I could discuss it more intelligently. I mean, it's hard to discuss something when you don't know the background.
Well, I think it's helpful to have because I'm constantly, and I mean this in a negative, but
Right.
the terminology, I think there's certain ownership there that expects that if the council changes it, they're going to rezone his property and let it open the door tomorrow, and I don't think that's the expectation. So yes, getting the language for everyone to use so that we're talking about the same thing, I can do that. I can get you the chronology. I imagine that's going to be part of the council's discussion should they want to initiate a plan amendment.
Right.
So I can get that for you.
But even sitting on the council would be helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
I may not go into the level of detail with every discussion, but I can get you a general chronology of what's happened. So.
As a Johnny-come-lately to this group, I would feel very much helped by
Yeah.
that chronology.
Yes, sir.
Anything further? I'll
We do have a
entertain.
motion.
Huh?
He's already got a motion on the floor.
Oh. Is
I'll
there
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry for extending that.
Oh. I love nothing better.